Michael, we have a country that the likes of which I've never seen. It's a shouting, screaming, ranting, raving bunch of lunatics that cannot let go of the fact that almost 3 years ago an election decision was made and their candidate didn't get elected. And they have come up with every crazy scheme possible, and it's blown up in their face, and yet they continue to try more crazy screaming, made up rhetoric that has so distracted this nation. I'm surprised that we are not economically crippled, because we have no new legislation. We have no new issues we're talking about on the Senate floor. We're not debating the future of America and creating programs. They're still fighting about the wall. They're fighting about Brett Kavanaugh and what he might have done when he was in high school. It's absurd. Have you ever seen anything like this before?
Well, certainly not. And in the age of social media, it's become significantly worse, because social media has become more than social. It's become the predominant media for a lot of people in the digital age. And so there's a lot of disinformation that's going on, a lot of stories. A lot of people don't realize that, if you have a Facebook page, for example, that has 5,000 subscribers, you're broadcasting your opinion to an audience which in some cases is larger than some radio stations. And so there's a lot of irresponsibility, not just in social media, but in media in general. And so I think a lot of the angst and consternation is not necessarily dissimilar than what we've seen in the past. It's the distribution and the dissemination of it to a wider audience that has had such an amazing impact. But to answer your question, no, I really and truly haven't. Outside of that, it is absolutely mind-numbing. And when we have to have a debate about the virtues of truth versus facts, that just goes to demonstrate how completely off our rocker many people in this country have become. And what's really interesting is that people such as you and I, we look at it as though it's a political debate, where it's really more of a cultural debate. And I think a lot of people don't understand that what we're seeing is a culture war in this country today. And I don't want to steal the line from Alex Jones, but there really is a war on for your mind. Luckily, I don't think they're winning it.
The bizarre thing to me is that in this new IG report, the names that are coming out are all Obama appointees. And what should be paramount, what should be crystal clear to the average American, is that the person that you elect to office is the smallest minority of government that exists. You have, 435 representatives, 100 senators, a president and a vice president, 537 elected officials out of a government which is in excess of 1 million employees who are appointees and hirelings that are operating at the level of whatever they are and can do exactly what all these individuals that were involved in this sham of a Mueller investigation, the sham of these innuendos about these accusations that were from anonymous sources. And these are people who are being paid by the government that are not elected officials. And then you have the other side of it, which we have elected officials that do not represent the electorate. They are not doing what they are paid to do, what they were voted in to do. I have not yet heard my representatives stand up on the floor of the House or in the Senate and represent my opinion, nor has it been solicited.
I think a lot of people in this country have taken a wait-and-see attitude towards what's going on, especially the politicians on the right. And you and I were discussing before we went live today about whether or not the Republicans, particularly in this field of the 2020 hopefuls, whether or not they are taking more of a back seat, hoping that they themselves will draw out enough of a noose, if you will, to hang themselves prior to the election. And I think a lot of people in the Republican side, particularly the conservative right, are being being very, well, they're being a little bit too patient for my taste, as well as feckless at the same time. They don't want to upset the proverbial apple cart. And I think a lot of this goes back to, and not necessarily our representatives, but I think a lot of it goes back to the fact that the swamp that Trump speaks of was actually much deeper and much murkier than I think the average American knew. And I think there's a lot of people on the right that might find themselves deeply mired in what could be the end result of ongoing investigations. I think a lot of them are just diving for cover. And it's a crying shame, because you're right. Nothing's getting done. The Democrats are doing nothing more than trying to craft gridlock for the purposes of slowing down whatever momentum Donald Trump happens to have. But yeah, it's very frustrating, because at the end of the day, when truth and honesty and honor and valor are not allowed to rule the day, and you've got the hypocrisy and the chaos and the anarchy from the left, it's extremely frustrating. And then when you have our representatives that seem to be standing idly by and allowing it to continue, it's just exasperating as it can possibly be. I share your frustration. I just don't know that a good portion of the Americans do. I think a lot of people out there are just, it's become somewhat of a blood sport. I look at the news today. I look at Washington, D.C. today, and I make a comparison to soap operas. People tune in for the entertainment value. You know, you probably remember back when Schwarzkopf was in the Middle East. And we had Peter Arnett and the Scud Stud, and every day you would go, you'd go home, you have dinner, maybe you have a libation or whatever, you turn the TV on, and you'd watch the news, the war in prime time, and then the news comes on. And I think politics has become very much primetime entertainment for a lot of people, and I think a lot of Republicans identify that. It's wrong, but I think they identify that, and they simply are staying out of the fray, so they allow the Democrats to continue on with their nonsense because they don't want to be tainted by it.
We have an election coming up. We just had two odd elections to replace representatives, and both candidates from the Republican Party won in districts where they may not have had that kind of sway in the past. Donald Trump campaigned for them. That seemed to tip the scale. So on one side, you have people who are psychologically evaluating the president, examining every word clip, every word formation, and putting together a group of psychologists who are now evaluating and saying that every time he speaks, every time he tweets, we're going to examine that as if he were a patient. Collectively, we're going to come up with a diagnosis of him being psychologically unfit for office because he's a narcissist. Every politician is a narcissist.
Absolutely.
He's an egomaniac. It's a prerequisite to be a politician. You have to be an egomaniac. He is caustic. You have to be confrontational in order to be a candidate. To rise to the top of the competition, 10, 12 candidates for an office, you have to bully your way to the front of the line, whether you do it through elegant or you do it through bully. Whatever you do, you're going to get your opponent out of the way. I see nothing extraordinary. I do wish that there was some filter. I do wish that there were some things he did not knee-jerk react to that broadcast and created the narrative. But I still say the same thing I said to you sitting in the same chair when I said, I really hope that Jeff Sessions is being used as a backgrounder, somebody to dig deep, that there's nothing happening with him and he's going deep. And well, that didn't happen.
Right.
There was nothing magical, marvelous, and wonderful that came out of his 2 years in office, and we're kind of left to start over again. And now we're starting to see activity at the IG level. We're starting to see activity at the AG level. We're starting to see activity, and charges will be coming out of this, hopefully. Now, will they indict? Will they pardon? Will they go the full route? Will Donald Trump ever get justice? Will America ever get justice against Hillary Clinton and Barack Hussein Obama? I don't know.
I have my doubts. I have very dedicated doubts for a variety of reasons. Number one is, the fallout that the parties themselves could experience, because I think the corruption is probably much deeper than we realize, number one. Number two, there's also the security aspect of it, about displaying the country's dirty laundry, internationally speaking. It does, we're coming into some really contentious times, particularly in the Middle East. You and I have talked about that on numerous occasions. We've got security issues with the Russians, the Chinese, the North Koreans, and I just don't know from a national security perspective if widespread corruption charges are going to be coming down from the Clintons and McCabe and all the others that are involved. I do think that there's certainly going to be some underlings that are caught up in this web. Will it go to the highest levels? I actually do think that at the end of the day, justice probably will not prevail. I think that there will be a feigning towards it. But I think that Trump is going to have, his advisors anyway, are going to advise him to roll back some of the attempts at putting people away. Will the Clintons go down? Likely not. Will McCabe go down? I actually am very hopeful that he will. But I don't think it's going to go to the highest levels.
It's unfortunate because this has become the pattern of politics. It's both the deterrent and the invitation. To the one who wants to advance and acquire access to prominence and to great wealth, and to going into office with a net worth of $300,000 and coming out of office with a net worth of $30 million is pretty attractive to a lot of people.
Sure.
What it takes to get there, the trade-offs to get there, the compromise to get there, we're definitely seeing. And we've always known that there's been a lot of it. But the depth of corruption, the Jeffrey Epstein situation, the associates to him, the associates to the Clinton Foundation, this isn't just people who are being indicted. There's a lot of dead people, a long line of dead people who are interconnected with both Epstein and the Clinton Foundation. This would be enough for any prosecutor, any investigator to see that there is a connection. When you have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people dying early, suspicious circumstances, and there's not a huge investigation into it, it's got to call into question the corruption of the days of J. Edgar Hoover and how he ran things. Mm-hmm. Is that what's happening today?
I think so. I've said it many times before, and people need to realize that they're obviously, economically speaking, in this country, a lower class, middle class, and an upper class. But then there's also the political class, and we're not members of that. And the politicians in this country today, I think a big part of the issue also, Rabbi, is that a lot of Americans think, well, how can Americans do this to Americans? Without realizing that there is an echelon, if you will, of people in this country that are more loyal to their own pocketbooks, their cabals, their families, whatever the case may be. As Barack Obama said, they're citizens of the world first. They're not Americans first. And so at the end of the day, these people operate outside of the law. And frankly, the people that you're referring to, there's even a level higher than them. So the average American, I don't think, can really get their head around the fact that politics in D.C. has been corrupt for many, many, many years. But the corruption breeds corruption. They are, as you point out, they go to office, they're worth a couple $100,000, they come home, they're worth $30, $40 million. How does that happen? In the past, the American public has simply not paid attention to it. They have operated in the shadows all this time, and now all of a sudden they're exposed for what they are. I don't know that it's getting any worse. I know that it's becoming more evident, but I think a lot of people in this country cannot get their heads around the extent and the size of it. Epstein, that's the tip of the iceberg. These things have been going on for many, many, many years. I think that there's probably a large faction of people inside the Beltway that could possibly be looking at life in prison, or should be. And the reason that we're not going to the extent that we are is once those dominoes start to fall, they're going to fall significantly and over the heads of a lot of people. And I think that's something that Trump and the administration and the political structure overall has to temper, because I think it's that widespread.
So if that's the case, and we have a president that continues to tweet out, lock them up, prosecute, go after them, at what point is it that we, as a country, as a government, I mean, if these are directives to the Inspector General, if these are directives to the Attorney General, expose it. Blow the lid off of it. Bring it out in the open. Prosecute. Bring it to the grand jury. Let the grand jury decide. It's not something the president decides.
Right.
It's something that a prosecutor brings a case before a grand jury, and the grand jury decides to indict or not to indict. We're kind of in this period where we're at the same stage that the rumblings began in the 2016 election period. Now we're coming up, it's 2019, elections are coming up 2020. We're in September. We've got a year. Okay, people have their minds made up. Okay, Comey dropped the bomb 2 weeks before. Will there be a bomb dropping that's going to shatter the election? Did we see that that's an effective strategy? Did we learn something from that? That if you have the goods, drop the goods and bring the doubt to win the election. The question's going to be is that's fine for the presidency. What's going to happen to the House? If we can't change the complex of the House, of the balance and win the majority, we're just going to have 4 more years of this infighting, of this move to impeach, of hanging on to every word that's tweeted out and make it like these are the most heinous crimes that have ever been committed in the world, and still have no government. 8 bad years, eight good years of Donald Trump, or 8 years of Donald Trump. He's so hamstrung in what he's able to do. And yet we keep pointing to the economics, we keep pointing to jobs, we keep pointing to the economy, and nobody seems to care that that's what's driving this country's success, or the programs and the regulations that he got rid of to open up the narrative. Is there a strategy here? Is there somebody, and you know, we look at the RNC, the DNC, who are the strategists? Who are the great minds here?
There's an awful lot to that, and so many different tentacles. Number one, the media is never going to allow the pressure to come off. Trump will most likely get reelected, and the House is kind of a coin toss. A lot of that's going to depend. You got to bear in mind, you've got districts that are run by like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, etc., where although they are freshman politicians, they are well entrenched in their individual districts because of the cultural composite of where they're being elected from. So those seats are going to be difficult to flip. Some of the other ones in the House we might have a little bit more success with. If we don't flip the House, then in fact you're going to see 4 more years of exactly what we're getting. But is it a strategy? It absolutely is a strategy, because you think about this for just a second. Trump not only ran on the economy, on immigration, etc., he ran on a lot of his campaign promises were really along the lines of a Democrat promise. And he's a better Democrat than they are. They've got nothing. The economy's chugging along. The only thing that we've got now is the issue over guns, which, as you and I were discussing earlier, 4% of Americans seem to be concerned with gun control. But if you look at the Beto O'Rourke's of the world, the narrative is that the entire country. Pelosi throws up numbers like 60 and 70%, when that's just absolutely not true. So at the end of the day, I think you have the proverbial silent majority, which is going to support Trump no matter what happens, because the strategy as we know it, and now the strategy of calling out Kavanaugh again, and we're going to impeach Trump all over again, but nobody's defined high crimes and misdemeanors, whatever the case may be, I think it's starting to fall on deaf ears. I really and truly do. Will that change things at the poll? Because right now, if the Trump supporters show up, if the conservatives show up, there's not a chance the Democrats win. Unfortunately for us, although they are technically in the minority, they are extremely loud. They are extremely vocal. They're like that bratty kid that mom's dragging through the Walmart, who's crying his eyes out, screaming for a toy that disrupts the entire works and gets everybody all up, up in arms and all upset as well. And I think at the end of the day, that strategy is going to fail. It has failed time and time and time again. Nobody cares about impeaching this president. Nobody cares about the things that the Democrat 2020s tells us we should be caring about, period. The Kavanaugh thing was a complete snooze. They're not going to be able to get Trump on that. And you know what else is interesting about it? Is that Trump is so forthcoming with his shortcomings that it's almost like he's taking all of his dirty laundry and he's dumping it out there and people don't want to hear it any longer. A year from now, he could, like that comment he made about walking out in the street and shooting somebody, which was asinine and ridiculous, but it is something kind of like that, where the people that are going to vote for him are already going to vote for him. You're not going to change the Democrats' mind. The only people we have to fight over is who's in the middle, and every day we seem to whittle away from that group and bringing them towards the right.
If the Founding Fathers looked at America today,
oh, they'd be appalled.
Over what?
Several different things. Number one, over the assault on the Constitution, number one. The Founding Fathers gave us the amendment process. If you want to change a law, amend it. The problem is the states are not going to jump on board even with gun control. In addition to that, the Founding Fathers spoke to things like morality. But one of the issues is that there were certain words in that particular time, in that vernacular, that meant something a little bit different than what we think they mean today. When they were speaking about morality, they were not necessarily speaking about promiscuity as much as they were service to country, country first, people working. That's why in the early days you had to be a landowner to vote. They were speaking about the morality of doing what's right by men and having open, honest debates. That's one of the things that they would be the most insulted by, is this socialist give it to me now generation. I don't want to channel JFK, but it is something very similar to ask not what your country can do for you. The Founding Fathers, many of them died broke. Many of them made massive sacrifices. During the war, Washington didn't even return to Mount Vernon for 7 years. They were willing to make these amazing sacrifices that nobody in the country today seems to be willing to make. They had a generational approach, and it's the give it to me now, give it to me free, give it to me without the morality of service that I think would appall them the most, and then the complete just attempt to eliminate the Constitution, whether it's talking about gun rights or the Electoral College or whatever the case may be. They would not have been opposed to us changing gun laws through the amendment process. But they certainly would have been through the fiat process that we seem to have today.
Such a state of affairs that, unlike any other part, and as I look at my lifetime, I've been alive for 25% of America's history, and I've never seen conditions like this. And there's wars going on. There's major wars going on. We've got issues now with Saudi Arabia being bombed, and that has an impact on world oil, not our oil, but world oil. It moves the temperature up in the Middle East to now, is there going to be on the cusp of an election, on the cusp of new negotiations between Iran, Russia, the United States' role, Turkey's role, what's Europe going to do? Because Europe is not the Europe that we ever knew before. We recognize nothing about Europe anymore. You've got new leadership in Great Britain. You've got new leadership in Italy. You've got new leadership in coming up in Germany. You've got issues in Central and South America. We're kind of at a stage which is an unusual stage of America seems to be calm by comparison to the rest of the world, which is in a complete and total upheaval.
It truly is. And if we do not remain calm, then much of the rest of the world is going to be responsive to that. We've got to deal with, things going on in France, things going on in Venezuela, things going on with the Koreas, things going on in terms of China and Russia, and there has got to be some continuity of thought in this country. Otherwise, we're going to see, I'm not as concerned about World War III, if you want to call it that, as I am just the complete implosion of cultures and economies around the world. especially if you have a very feckless Democrat leadership in the White House. Because at the end of the day, you think about it for just a moment, with the exception of FDR, most of the world has never really feared our Democrat presidents. Now, Kennedy, after the missiles of October crisis, perhaps he caught Khrushchev's attention. But then you look at Reagan coming off of Carter. You look at Bush. And you look at all the other, they'd love to have had a Hillary Clinton. All this nonsense about Russian collusion and getting Donald Trump in office. What a farce. They would have loved to have had Hillary Clinton in there. They would have loved to have had 4 more years of Barack Obama. So we've got to have a measure of stability. And I'll tell you something else, too. I'm not a super big fan of some of the more outlandish tweets that President Trump has done. But you know what's interesting, Rabbi, is that historically speaking, when other countries think that the United States president is a little off of his rocker, it goes a long way to national security. That's why the hostages were released after Carter got out of office. There was no fear there. They were concerned about this cowboy, Ronald Reagan. And so as America continues this waffling back and forth, this feminized mamby-pamby, pull your big girl panties and big boy panties up, as long as we're starting to move away from, the old, and I don't want to say, it's not a white thing, it's not a supremacy thing, it's a devout, staunch, it's about being manly. It's about, and I don't mean that even from a gender perspective, it's about being tough, pioneering, forthright, honorable, and strong. The world needs that because we are the linchpin to international security. If America ceased to exist today, militarily speaking, you really think the North's going to have a problem invading South Korea? You really think the Chinese are going to have a problem going into Hong Kong? You really think Putin's going to have a problem reassembling the old USSR? We, and we alone, are the ones that keep that stability. And all we need is this is going to be so chauvinistic, and I'm going to admit it. But one of the problems that I always had with, at this period in our time, having a female president in the Oval Office, I'm not saying they don't have the intellect to do the job, but we will be tested as a nation by our foes in the Middle East that disrespect womanhood in general, and it will be viewed as a position of weakness from their theocratical viewpoints. We've got to have toughness, and we've got to have a little bit of crazy in the White House, because every time we've seen prolonged periods of peace throughout the world.
Well, that instability, that psychological instability, not sure what this president will do in any set of circumstances. He's not predictable, and maybe that's the problem that people are having, is he's not predictable. He will respond to the same situation in 2 different ways, and that keeps you from being able to kind of project out what he might do in a particular situation. And he's not doing that, and therefore, what do you do with the unknown? And so that becomes the unknown factor. And Donald Trump's, for whatever his let's say his peculiarities are what's keeping many of these world leaders on edge, saying, do I make him a friend or do I make him a foe? And we're seeing Putin, who is not taking a firm position yet. We've seen Macron come head-to-head and lose. We've seen Trudeau come head-to-head and lose. We saw what happened with the changing of the guard in England, because you know what? If you're going to leave, leave. Okay? Leave and work out the details behind closed doors, but leave.
Right.
If you say you're going to leave, leave. Okay? Do what you say you're going to do. And that's the kind of president he is. Now, in some cases, there may be a price to pay. I think that the change, I was glad he brought John Bolton in. I thought it was a smart move, because Bolton was the anti-Kerry. He was the complete opposite of John Kerry, who was the apology tour. Now you have a Bolton who's coming in, who is a hawk, who is, blow them up, bomb them, let's take over the Capitol. We have to strike a balance. There's got to be a balance, and there's got to be a respect. the discussion about making Pompeo, put him in both roles, which has been done before. Probably not the timing for that. There's too much volatility in the world. But we need to come up with some policy decisions that looks like we have a cohesive strategy, not run by one person. And it's starting to look a little bit like some of the accusations of an oligarchy, of a one-man show, are starting to poke through and have some credibility. We need to find a way to level that out and make some good, hard decisions with good results. That's what the people are looking for. And that's where we are. We're talking with Michael Hart, host of MichaelHartShow.com. You can catch him every morning, Monday through Friday, from
9 Eastern.
9 o'clock Eastern until
10:30, depending on what kind of mood I'm in.
Depending on his mood, and that's the way it should be, because when Michael's on a roll, he should be on a roll and left to his own devices. But catch him on MichaelHartShow.com and get a copy of Unknown America, Myths and Little Known Oddities about the greatest nation on earth. You'll find things out about the country you live in that many of us have taken for granted and don't really understand how the system is supposed to work and why we do what we do, and some interesting points that make you realize that you are in a very young country compared to the countries around the world, and that we have had our own growing pains and own identity crises. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll rejoin Michael Hart for this Michael Hart Hour, talking about America. We'll be right back. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of two Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English, and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time
on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events.
Shalom, welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. Joining us on the third Monday of every month at the 10 o'clock hour is Michael Hart for the Michael Hart Show, just like on the web, themichaelhartshow.com. And Michael, welcome back to the program. Michael, we're seeing, and I'm just looking at some of the headlines, character assassination is something that has become a new MO to the depths. I don't remember, I remember being borked. I remember looking at recent activities, newly discovered facts about a person's life. But going back to what they did or said in high school, how is that a reflection? Are you today the same person you were in high school?
Well, luckily, no. I'm also not the same person I was last month. So, character assassination has been a very vibrant, very powerful strategy over the years. As you point out, Robert Bork, they tried it with the confirmation of Clarence Thomas. And the thing is that, and it kind of goes back to, to Biden's comments a couple of weeks ago of truth versus facts. The truth doesn't matter. Once it's out there, once you're tainted, once you're stained, that's really all that matters to most people. Because we have, as human beings, a predisposition to believe people in positions of authority. But once those beliefs are established, we typically don't look for the truth any longer. We look for facts that are going to substantiate what we've already made up our minds about. And so once the assassination attempt is made, it doesn't matter. It's just like the thing with the recent Kavanaugh accusations. It doesn't matter that the accuser has said it never occurred. It doesn't matter if it's been disproven from his past. It's out there. And a lot of people that have a predisposition to believe it are just going to go around and, yep, see, I told you, that's exactly what it was all about. I knew it all along. Christine Ford was absolutely right. And so it's so interesting as a strategy because it doesn't have to be proven. It doesn't have to, and frankly, not having to prove it gives the opportunity for the consumer of it to make it whatever they want it to be and to blow it up in their minds as large as it can possibly be. So we're not going to see it go away. And I think that's one of the reasons why Trump comes out the way that he does. I mean, he's a bigot, he's a xenophobic, he's a misogynist, he's a racist, he's all these things. Luckily, none of that is what's stuck, but it's not going to keep the Democrats from utilizing it time and time and time again with the hopes that enough people will get on board. But I'll tell you something. I think, and I believe this in my heart, Rabbi, I really do. I think the majority of Americans have just had it with it. I think they've had enough. And I think if the people that are going to support this president show up to the polls, I think the Democrats are going to be stunned at what a landslide victory this may very well become. And I'm a little bit reticent about saying that, not because I don't think I'm right, but because I don't want to encourage people to not go to the polls. We need to send that message. But the character assassinations and the bomb dropping that you referenced earlier, we're going to get a lot more of that.
Has there ever been a prior attempt?
Sorry, I didn't quite.
Has there ever been a prior attempt to impeach a Supreme Court justice?
There has been discussions of it, but no, not in the past, because, first off, impeachment is very, very, very difficult. And the thing is, nobody really paid attention to the Supreme Court until about the time that Reagan came on board, because if a president does not have, during his tenure, any Supreme Court justices to appoint or to nominate, the Supreme Court's off everybody's radar. So it's been discussed in the past, but nothing like with Kavanaugh.
The attempt to personally damage, and recently a comment was made by somebody who I was on the White House staff, and said that the Trumps, plural, are the future of America. And that statement alone implies that the sons and daughters and all the people with the last name Trump are going to become the new dynasty. So we had the Bush family dynasty, we had the Kennedy family dynasty, and so it was almost as if preparing for a Trump family dynasty, that there's going to be members of his family that will go on to offices and to positions in government. I think the timing of it was foolish. I think it only broadens the attack on his stability, that if you think he's building a dynasty, that just goes to another reason why you don't want him in office. You don't want more of him in office. And if he thinks this way and all of his kids line up, they must think this way too. You know, did you hear about that statement?
I did.
And what was your response to it?
Anything that, you know, we're always talking about how bad dynasties are on the right. But as you point out, you know, like Camelot, it was, you know, it was so celebrated at that period of time, and you know, and we have Kennedys in office right now to this day, and probably will for the foreseeable future. But something to bear in mind here is that the Kennedys were a political dynasty from Jump Street. You know, Trump was not that way. I don't know that there is a threat from the family in terms of a political dynasty in the future, but I do think that it was a very inappropriate statement to be made, because at the end of the day, it really doesn't make that much difference. You know, John Adams' son, John Quincy Adams, was also president of the United States. Political dynasties for the purposes of serving the country are not that unique. They're not that rare. But in this regard, it was kind of like, you know, the statement, if Donald Trump gets reelected, then we've got, you know, Trump's ad nauseum for the foreseeable future. The only way that even occurs is if the Democrats continue on with the same policy lines they're on, the character assassinations, and these basic attempts to overthrow government from a cultural perspective. Do I think it was ridiculous to him to say? Yeah, I do.
The loose lips, and we go back to all the way to the beginning of the presidency, of the leaks and the loose lips and the commentary, it doesn't seem to have changed. Therefore, it's become a culture of people saying things that they wind up regretting, and it doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon. In the upcoming election, 2020, every House seat is up for election. It's the cycle.
Right.
I haven't heard a lot of the narrative. I haven't heard a lot of what is the vision, because if everybody, including the Speaker of the House, is up for re-election, then there is no voice that's going to represent what the new House is going to look like. If we go this way, this is what we're going to do. The lack of policy, the lack of cohesion, the only thing that the House has come out with is a position to be opposed to Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. That's it. So when this local in Alabama, when the local representative comes around and comes around with their platform, I'm going to be looking for, who are you connected with? Where, you know, if there was a message coming from 300 or 400 representatives around the United States saying that we, as the future House of Representatives, we're the candidates elect or candidates up for office, have already met, and as they should have, and this is our platform for going forward, for changing the course of America and implementing these policies and changing this, I think people would applaud a real message that took all this garbage out of it. I think it's why millennials are being disengaged from the church. They're being disengaged from politics. They're being disengaged from life as you and I know it. They're doing their own thing, their own way, because they see how absurd all of this is. This is absurdity. It's comedy.
It is. It completely is. And, the millennials, as you point out, they are disengaging. The Bernie Sanders and the Beto O'Rourke rallies of the world would kind of create the illusion that they're engaged. But a lot of them are very frustrated with the world that they perceived as their parents having built for them. And they've got a whole different set of issues that are important to them that the Democrats are not speaking to. They're more worried about tolerance and gender identification and, free sex and all the other things that go along with it that the media is telling them that they're entitled to, because if it feels good, then, by all means do it. And so they're beginning to really, morph their way away from politics in this country. But the thing about it is, I don't see any cohesion even within the parties, because ironically enough, in the sense that we've got to get Donald Trump, the Democrats are more unified than the Republicans, but that's all they've got. And the Republicans, in response right now, have you ever remembered a time in your lifetime where basically the party ran on the platform of "we're not them"? Because that's basically where we are.
Right.
And so the Democrats' platform is going to be get Trump. The Republicans' platform is going to be keep Trump in. The problem is it's an emotional argument that the millennials, in a large sense, are not playing along with. But it's an emotional argument, and then we have the intellectual audacity to use logic, great job numbers, the economy, et cetera, to drive an emotional argument. Emotion has taken over the day, and on both sides. And that's going to be something which is going to be very difficult to articulate, because at the end of the day, most Americans, and I know this is true, most Americans do not care about politics on the level that we do. To them, it's infighting, the die is cast, the decisions are made, it doesn't affect my life. It's, it's a laundry list of reasons why they don't really care that much about it. And they just kind of disengage from it. They come around election day, they cast their ballot, they think they've done their patriotic duty, and they're done. But, at the end of the day, I don't see it. We're going to have to, in this day and time, and I don't know if this is biblical or not, we are going to have to embrace a new America, because we're not going back to the olden days. And I really think that most politicians in this country today don't know what that looks like. And because of that, they cannot craft the message that you hope they would.
If all we have is 5 more years of a Republican presidency, at the end of that period of time, people will say, well, it was ineffective, we accomplished nothing. We've had 8 years of it, we had 8 years of Obama, we had 8 years of Trump, let's try something new. That something new is going to be the demise of America as we know it. And we are headed in that direction, because that generation that's now 18 to 30 is now going to be 22, 24 to 40, and that's a big swath of the population that's going to have developed opinions as to whether or not government's relevant to them or not. And they're going to be the ones who are going to be the driving forces and the voice, if there's going to be a voice. Right now, there's just noise, and it's the same noise. And every time you turn on the news, it's the same noise. And it's where you don't watch the news. That's why the ratings are so far down. It's why our ratings are higher than CNN's. When CNN dropped to 1 million viewers, they became comparable to us as an independent religious broadcasting network that has that kind of viewership around the world. That's a huge commentary on the ineffectiveness of the news media, who are trying to direct the narrative, and they're not. They're creating false narratives. They're making stories up, and they're unapologetic about the stories they make up. They just go on to the next made-up story, and people are continuing to keep their jobs. We never saw a time like that. We go back to the Walter Cronkite days. We go back to the days where we look at the print media and say, if it wasn't true, they wouldn't print it because it was researched. It was completely confirmed.
Right.
Okay, it was very rarely was there ever something that required a retraction. Now there's very rarely something that's factual presented. So you just take it now for it's Sean Hannity's entertaining. He's flamboyant. He's loud. He's animated. If you're going to watch somebody on TV, you'd rather watch somebody animated than somebody stiff like Wolf Blitzer or somebody who's just so deadpan. But the content is predictable.
Mm-hmm.
All right? CNN's going to be against Trump, and Fox is going to be for Trump. And you've got one player on the Fox team that they can't touch now because of who he is and what he does, and he can say whatever he wants and get away with it because he's just a lawsuit waiting to happen. But other than that, where do we find the truth?
Here. This is just like this. The program that we do, over at Heart of America and the Michael Hart Show is, we have a YouTube channel as well. We try to get the information out there. But it really is, a lot of people call it independent media. I refer to it as the orphan media because we have no parent. But at the end of the day, it really is here. It really is online. It really is the people that are willing to research it because, there's no big corporate entity that's going to come in and take you off the air for speaking the truth. Same thing applies to me. We can say things, we can do things without the concern of having, we all have sponsors, but these are people that share the vision. They're not just looking to attract an audience. There's a big difference between sponsorship that somebody that wants, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker to speak the truth versus I need to sell more cars. And so people need to understand that the national news media, whether it's Fox, whether it's NBC or MSNBC or CNN, you can't depend on them. Because at the end, you mentioned the book that I wrote, Unknown America. It's full of myths that are from American history, many of them propagated by a media in their time that was unwilling to investigate. There's a lot of things going on in this country today that people don't know, they're not aware of. And they all have, their benefactors, the big national news media, and as you point out, the contracts and the lawsuits and all that kind of stuff. So to answer your question, Rabbi, it's you, it's me, it's people that are doing it out of a passion, out of a love, out of a desire to get the truth out. And that just does not exist. We can say all the media leans to the left. Okay, that's true. But I'll be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of a lot of the media on the right either.
No, I'm not either. I agree with you. And we have a responsibility, you and I, to do what we believe our Lord tells us to do. We believe what the Bible tells us what to do, and that is to be truth tellers. And that doesn't mean that we line up behind, just because the king is an idol worshiper doesn't mean we become idol worshipers.
Right.
We don't have to follow in that pattern. We have a standard by which we adhere to. We've been talking with Michael Hart, host of MichaelHartShow.com, and Heart of America is his overarching ministry. You can find him online, get his book, Unknown America. You can get it through his website or on Amazon. Michael Hart, always great to have you here.
My pleasure, sir.
Find him here on the third Monday of every month at the 10 o'clock hour. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.